Hey, this is my good friend and colleague, Paul Kirschbaum. I'm Leslie Wooten. It's 10:33. Let's get into it. Today's topic, staffing and a labor model. So, Paul, yes or no, staffing can directly impact the overall success or failure of a restaurant?
Absolutely.
Agreed.
That's
Agreed.
why prime costs exist.
So, expound on that. What do you mean?
Prime cost is basically your the product that you're doing, your COGS plus your labor. I mean that accounts for in a full service restaurant. That's 50 to 60% of your dollar. Period.
Is it important for staffing levels to follow your expected sales levels?
Absolutely.
Okay. So
Absolutely.
if you, let's say you're a new restaurant or a new business, how do you staff accordingly if you don't have historical data to look at?
That's the hard part. I tell people, yeah, you don't have the records to look at it, but what you can do is build a plan. You don't.
Hmm.
I mean, you don't have to even meet that plan. And just as long as you have a plan in place, that means you thought it through, and you're looking forward to what you think is going to happen. Now you have to be able to adjust on the fly, and it starts with the first week. You compare.
Hmm.
The first week is craziness. We all know that. And the second week, you look at your
Of
last
opening?
week.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and then but the second week, that's when you start. Within week two, you have historical sales, and you start from there.
Mhm. I like that you said plan because I think that plan should involve month to month, even if it's 6 months out or you're confident enough to plan a year out and flexible enough to plan a year out. But I also think that within that month of a schedule and staffing expectations, you break it down to a week. And so you know how often you're using the same people over and over from one week to the next or one day to the next. And your management team has to have a plan in place of what to do each day. Communication is about planning for a week or a month out, but action is going to help you with your staffing levels throughout the day. Because if you suddenly get hit, you've got to know how to flex. You've got to know who's now running food for you, who's now at the front door or whatever it might be. And the other way around, if you overstaffed and sales are showing, nope, I'm overstaffed, you got to recognize it and know what your action plan is for making cuts and being involved with the shift, not just sitting in the back room in an office watching your restaurant through the cameras.
Absolutely agree with you.
For sure. So let's ask this. What's the benefit of short-term planning or long-term planning?
Oh, I mean, the benefits of short-term and long-term planning. They're both planned, so I'm happy that there's
Yeah,
if you got one of them.
yeah.
I'm happy.
One,
Let's be
do
honest.
it. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, short-term planning is the now. Long-term planning is forecasting. That's the way I kind of interpret it. You might be
Hmm.
thinking a little different to you. As long as there is you're forecasting forward, I'm pretty much happy. The now is important. The day-to-day plan is important,
Hmm.
but having a structure of kind of what you want, having a structure for your labor plan is important. I call it the SMART plan. Okay, being specific, being measurable, being attainable, being realistic, and being time bound. Those
Are
are
you
the things
reading
that
off of the wall over there? You got a big poster with that?
absolutely, because
That's great.
I have them taped up all around my office
Love
because
it.
I will forget them.
Love it.
Those
No, I'm
are
totally
those are
with you.
the
Yeah, I've got notes for everything. Like, why
yep.
why try to memorize everything? But it's just funny. I see you reading smart. I'm like, yeah, get it,
Yeah, it's got
get it.
I got a monitor right there,
Nice.
and I have all my notes.
Yeah.
A smart plan is it's imperative. Those are the it's not just a funny acronym. That's that right? I'm not known for my
Yeah. Well, there's a acronym or not. It's a task to live by in order to improve your communication and your expectations and make the plan that you're talking about. I also think with short-term versus long-term, we could also bring in full-time versus part-time or even seasonal employees and looking at who's with you for the long run and what you're investing in them with the full-time status and what comes with that versus part-time and what's helping somebody out on the side or just getting their feet wet, getting their first taste of the industry. and pushing through what that part-time looks like, or seasonal, somebody you bring back because it's the right time to have them there. And knowing whether you have your own historical data or not for your particular business on your street corner, wherever it might be, the industry has year over year data that you can look at. You should know the trends. You should know when you need to staff up. You should know when your part-timers are going to be pushing full-time status. And you should know when your full-timers are going to be missing out on some of the expected hours, and you should be able to manage ahead of time and set them up for those expectations as well. You mentioned,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I live in a seasonal area, you know, and I tell people all the time, you know, they say, well, I need to start looking for staff. I was like, before the season, you know, before the end of the summer, you need to start looking at next summer. You know, talking to your current staff, looking at people that you know in the industry. The time to look for a staff is not right before your seasonal stuff kicks off. You need to plan ahead, and that's why in seasonal is more long-term planning than anything like, you know, New York is somewhat seasonal, but really you're just kind of busting 24/7 there. You know, but I think just the simplest thing is you got the long-term, the short-term plan, having a plan at minimal.
And I with some colleagues right now, myself included, with my own work, coming back from the COVID-19, from the coronavirus, getting back into the heat of things, like getting back into business, I'm seeing a lot of colleagues who are not planning for what that's going to look like. You've got this huge staff that is furloughed, in waiting, and you suddenly get the green light to open your doors. 3 days is not enough to give anybody to be able to prepare a large staff and get the doors open. You've got to have that plan, and you've got to start that now, whether it's opening a new business, going into your second year of business, following a pandemic where we've got to get reopened and prepare. And that plan has to be in place for what you're going to do. Whether it's a holiday that does not reflect the same holiday on the same date as the year before, so you weren't prepared for it, sales year over year, or it's an event like this where you don't know who's about to walk in your front doors and you don't know what kind of volume you're going to have to get. You've got to have a plan of attack from a management team, whichever way that it goes.
Absolutely. I mean, this is unprecedented. And it is just like opening a brand new restaurant. Would you give your staff 3 days to get ready for a brand new restaurant?
Some people do, and I guarantee you, I can tell you what the likely fate of that restaurant is going to be. Same as if an established restaurant tries to do that right now.
Did we do that one time?
Just once? I'm sure we've done it a few times.
I think I remember in our 20s when we just like, oh, we don't need a week to get our servers trained.
We know what we're doing. Why would we have to teach them? Yeah.
I know.
Being blind everything in this industry is nuts.
Nuts. So smack 20-year-old me.
No, that's how we got here. Yeah, we know. Yeah. And it goes back to the same thing that you and I 100% agree on, that we would recommend if somebody said, should I open a restaurant? That answer is
no.
No, do not.
The ones that know most about restaurants don't even run restaurants.
No, get out of there. Run. But if you are going to open one, call us. We'll give you your best opportunity to be able to open it successfully and stay opened. Yeah, absolutely. But even if somebody hired me for advice, the first thing I'd say is this is a bad idea. But since you're going forward with it, here's what we'd do, and it involves the planning that you're talking about. You've got to know year over year what the trends are in industry. You've got to know what full-time versus part-time looks like. You've got to know what seasonal looks like, and you've got to know what to do with those employees that are working for you or expecting to work for you when you can't have them in the door, as in a slow season or whatever it might be. Yeah. What's your take on using software for it?
My take on software, it's imperative. Technology, the use of technology for staffing and staffing purposes, it's a make or break kind of thing. It is so important. You know, people get so hung up on other things, and they spend so much time maybe on food cost and everything else. And it's the same numbers. I mean, like I said, your food
Mhm.
costs what, 28 to 35, whatever. We're not going to get into the exact details, but together with that and labor, we should in general between under 60%. It's a big chunk of money, and they don't put as much effort, I guess, into it. And I think it's a big miss. Technology, not only for your POS system side of it, for the tracking and the year to date, month to date, whatever your numbers you're looking at, but also the technology for scheduling.
Mhm.
If you don't use
Yeah.
a scheduling platform, especially if your staff is younger, to me it's crazy. I mean, we're all on our phone and not using the technology that the generations are craving and use. I think is a big miss. The days of a handwritten schedule, not only is that time consuming, for the manager, uh,
Right.
it, it's it doesn't speak to your staff. So I think the technology aspect of it, not just the year to date and your numbers from your POS system, but also the stuff out there. There's some really cool stuff, and most of it's free. If you have a smaller restaurant, if you have
Right.
70 employees, it's free. It's not a lot of investment. The ROI is there.
Right, right. And there's absolutely the point of this software will improve your communication to your team, which I hope everybody realizes that if you find ways to improve your communication, your morale is going to go up, your loyalty is going to go up, your attrition rate is going to go down. It's going to improve things across the board, being able to communicate to your team, especially their time. Time is money. And for them to be able to plan their life around the schedule coming out is huge. So these handwritten schedules, or you post an Excel spreadsheet the day before the week of a schedule, your staff's going to respond poorly to that. But the point here is having that data in software somehow trackable so that you can look at it, you can make better business decisions in addition to having that cultural improvement as well as the communication with your staff. So it's just win-win to go with software. And if you're not prepared to use software yourself, you need to have a management team that knows how to use that as well.
Absolutely. I mean, our industry is lags very far behind when it comes to technology. So to me, if I walk into an establishment or owner brings me in to kind of look what's going on, and I see the
Mm-hmm.
manager sitting there handwriting the schedule, I'm just like, that's the first conversation. It's just, that's aggressive observation.
Mm-hmm.
Like how much time do you spend on that?
Oh my
The
God.
first question I asked was, how much time do you spend? They're like, oh, I spend an hour or two or 20 minutes. They always say like 10 to 20 minutes. But they had to text their employees, can you work this day? Can you do this? Who's doing this? Who's on vacation? When it all can be right in front of you.
Right. And they can go online, they can drop shifts, trade shifts, get shifts
Yep.
approved, put in a request. Why aren't you using the technology that's out there? And if you don't know how to use it, call us. Be very happy to show you
Yep.
any of the technologies, what to expect from them, what a good cost is, what a good level is, and where it should be broken up from management responsibility for communication to your team. So let's flex a little bit beyond software. We both completely agree you need software, and why would you not have it? What are the benefits of grouping your strongest staff members together on a single shift?
Well, that's your all stars, right? Or we
Yeah,
call tier ones.
sure.
It's just the shift runs itself.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
It's as simple as I can put it. If you have all your whole and there's nothing wrong with different tiers. Like people, I don't treat tier one different than tier three. They're all set. That everybody has their spot, and then
Mm-hmm.
that's okay. But I don't want a tier one trading with a tier three, and that's why in these software, I know I'm not harping on the software, but the software you can actually rank them,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of weird doing it. But once you get it, once you get past that, it's no problem. But having your tier ones or your best employees all at once grouped together, it's a stronger unit, meaning there's less drop off, and
Right.
I
Mm-hmm.
think it's just a smoother shift in general.
For sure. So let's flip that. What are the benefits of spreading your strongest staff members throughout the week on different shifts, making sure that each shift then has one or two strong tier ones rather than everybody all at once on a Friday or Saturday night?
Consistency,
Hmm.
leadership, and training purposes. When you have that that tier one working with others, I think it motivates them,
Yeah.
um, depending on the personalities. But I think the consistency, that's the way I usually do it. I don't really group my guys together or girls together. We kind of just spread them out a little bit because it's a better consistency, and that's really what we were looking for in most, day-to-day operations.
I agree. I much prefer to spread out your strength throughout the week, because if your management team is relying on that smooth shift, then I see that as kind of a weakness in your management team that, oh, so you have to have all of your strength wrapped around you. You should be able to help the weakest link that you have improve and improve everybody. Because if you've got a shift where it's not the strongest, because let's be honest, if you're putting every strong server or bartender you have on the same shift, then there's another day of that week where they're not there. And that's really going to struggle. And that's going to prevent that consistency that you mentioned from guests coming in. And guests have an expectation of the business, not specifically the server. So overall,
Mhm.
I think you owe that to your guests, that they should be able to walk in any day and get consistent service and staffing.
And if you believe in your culture and your culture is doing is strong, and you have a good strength, good sense of team, that's
Mhm.
the whole point of it. I mean, that's what that everybody helps each other. And I'm gonna tell you, some of just doesn't matter what tier you're on, you have strengths. There are some, you might not be the best server when it comes to quickness, but you might be the best interpersonal person at the table.
Mhm.
And that is part of the whole team aspect of it. And you lean on people to help you to maybe the running of the food.
Sure.
That's where that kind of congeals together and makes a stronger unit.
Yep. Is it fair to put your tier one, your strong server or bartender on a slower shift? Haven't they earned better shifts? Is it fair to put them on a Tuesday or Wednesday afternoon? That's historically a slower shift.
Is it fair? It's fair.
Hmm.
But am I going to be doing that? Probably not. There is a morale thing that goes along with it. So you got to be careful. It is. Have I done it? Absolutely. And it's, but more when that happens, I think it's more of a conversation part of it.
Hmm.
Just to, out of respect, and just say, hey, listen, this is something we need. This is betterment for the restaurant. But most understand that, some do not. And so is it fair? Yes. Is it logical all the time? Maybe not.
Yeah, but I think it's important to balance the individual's schedule and making sure that they've earned it. They're your tier ones. You got to put them where you need to put them, but you've
Mhm.
also got to consider the business at the same time. So should the company provide equal shifts to all employees, including hours, opportunities? Should every member of your team have the same number of hours throughout the week?
No,
No, why not?
absolutely not. It's just, let me think this one through a little bit and say it. So I say it
Let,
politely.
let me jump in before you wander off too far. Should you give bigger opportunities to higher performers?
Yes, because that's what sales does. This is
Hmm.
a sales position.
Totally
It's
agree.
not
Yep.
people say it's a certain. We talked about this on other episodes. It
Hmm.
is a sales position. You don't go to any sales company and they get the top sales guy that sells the most, or lady gets the same shift as somebody or the same treatment as somebody
Hmm.
that doesn't perform as much. I mean, look at sports. I mean, it's if you perform on the field, you get a
You
little
got
bit more leeway.
starters. You've got the second string. Yeah,
You
yeah.
got the bench, and
You
then
got the practice team. Yeah.
and that's that is just the industry, and it's just not just our industry. There's a lot out there that do the same thing. You are most corporations base their your performance on your pay or your bonus.
Hmm.
It's, so there's got to be if you do well and you do well for the company, you're going to be rewarded somehow. If that reward is better shifts, more hours, or you know uh, a day off when you need it, or more leeway, that's just kind of how the world runs. And if some people don't like it, I understand, and maybe this business is not for you.
Sure. And for our audience, one of the main differences between what Paul does and what I do is Paul's operations and numbers and a lot of the metrics behind a business. And one thing that I've done is through training and a lot of the HR perspective. So part of that HR perspective, I want to make it real clear that not everything has to be equal across the board if you are able to identify the skills and behaviors that separate your workforce. Being able to identify that employee A versus employee B, that employee A does this and this and this better than employee B. Obviously, those separations can't be determined by race or gender or age, etc. But when a business takes time to identify the tasks, the behaviors, and the competencies required to complete a job and define the difference between basic requirements for the job versus exceptional status of a job well done, then you can start separating your workforce. And there's no problem with that at all.
Nope.
Because one of the big benefits that happens there is when you're identifying what's expected for each job, lower performers have a clear path that they understand that they have to do in order to be rewarded with the greater opportunities. Mm-hmm. So I strongly suggest putting your aces in your places, putting your high performers on those more rewarding shifts. But at the same time, you've got to be able to give some concrete evidence, some career pathing, some growth opportunities for those that aren't there about what they need to do. And sometimes you hear people say, well, just keep doing what you're doing. And that is not clear opportunity. You need to be able to outline specifically what you're not doing that this other person is doing. And if it's task oriented, fantastic, have at it. And I strongly support aces in their places. If you've earned the better shifts, the bigger bonuses at work for, corporate level, fantastic. It's all about your individual performance, and that should be outlined with attainable goals, the SMART goals that you were talking about. Because if you've got a management team that does not know how to use SMART goals, does not know how to do realistic objectives, that's where you're going to have a problem. And that's where your staff is going to see unequal opportunities that are biased rather than based on behaviors and tasks and competencies. If you can't outline that for them, then aces in their places isn't going to work for you. It's going to backfire.
Yeah, you have to have, and that's where that's where the numbers come into play. And that's why technology helps you with that, helps you confirm those, what your gut or what you see, is, what you're seeing on a day-to-day basis. You can factually go, look, this is
Right.
why. Look at the sales, look at her sales, look how she, look at her reviews online. She gets, she's the best of the best. And this is how she got here. And we give almost a job title to it. I mean, you almost have a job title for each tier, and it's not like, they're all doing the same job. They're all doing the same job title, but how are they aces? This is how. And it's usually three things. It's just their performance, their sales, their upselling, whatever it is, whatever your measurables are. Okay.
Yep. And I know Paul and I would both be more than willing to help anybody identify what those measurables are. And at the same time, you've got these measurables for which tier you're in or why you're considered a high performer or why you're considered a low performer. Those need to stay fluid, because if somebody who's a high performer during November and December when sales are high is suddenly a low performer during January, February, because it's just getting to them that they're not making the same money, that's a poor behavior, and it needs to be reflected in them moving down to a tier 2 or a tier 3, that they need to be able to maintain that gives the fluidity to your staffing levels so that they can move up or move down based on their daily, weekly, monthly performance. And your management team has to be on top of that, following the sales model, following your labor, making sure that you can staff accordingly. Because if you treat everybody like numbers, you have to balance it out. But if you treat them like people that are performing, you could put the right people where you need to and improve your business quite a bit. Mm-hmm. So here's another question. Because it's nearly impossible to get numbers exactly right. Should you aim as a business owner or manager to overstaff or understaff?
Neither.
But if you're going to miss the mark, which one's better?
God, it's hard. I would say overstaff is better.
Overstaff, why?
I would, because it all comes down to the customer experience. You have a better chance
Mhm.
of having a better customer experience. Yeah, you're going to have, you can't sustain on either of them. I
Right.
mean, there are going to be days that you're going to be overstaffed, there's going to be days you're going to understaffed. You can't predict everything.
Mhm.
But in general, I'd like to be slightly overstaffed. If I had to pick one, that would probably be the way. It's just because, again, goes down to the simple fact that I wanted the best customer experience. It's gonna hurt my P&L, but customer experience is number one.
I'm with you 100% on the answer of overstaff versus understaff. I definitely think it's the better choice. Where I disagree with you is I think you should aim to overstaff. Where if this is your staffing level and you've hit it, I'd still strongly suggest that you open up the doors to hire more people, because my experience of that motivates people for performance. That if they see that management team's going to continue hiring, that they're going to bring in more people that are needed for the shifts, somebody's got to go home. And again, it needs to be based on performance and ability and tasks. It gives you an opportunity to have a bad day. Hey, I'm having a bad day. I'm going to go home. I'm going to remove myself from this particular shift. Or I'm having a phenomenal day. I'm able to show off in front of staff and customers and management my abilities so that I can move myself into a tier one position. Because if you're understaffed, I I feel that staff has the opportunity to become complacent. Well, they're not going to hire
Yeah.
anybody else. We don't have enough people. What's my motivation? I'm getting the good shifts because we don't have the numbers for management to fulfill those shifts. So I really feel that overstaffing is going to help morale if you manage it the right way.
No, you put up a great point, because I mean, they do the same thing in the kitchen for like a prep list. I
Sure.
mean, you build your prep list on your past week sales, month sales, year to date, whatever way you do it, and then you always add 10 to 20%, because your goal is A, not to run out, and B, to be busier. Because you're right. Let's just be honest. The whole point is getting busier, and
Mhm.
if you're going to be busier, you better be staffed for it. So yeah, I think now that you talk it through a little bit and listen to you, you convinced me, Les. You convinced
I
me.
gotcha. Okay, good. So let's talk about this. A common term that I hear all the time is bench strength, and that falls right in line with overstaffing to me. What is bench strength, and what does it mean in a restaurant setting?
And strength is just like, like sports analogy.
Mm-hmm.
When you can't run your tier ones all the time, they're
Mm-hmm.
eventually going to get tired or burnt out. And you don't want that to
Or
happen.
promoted.
So,
Mm-hmm.
or promoted,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so you need your bench staff needs to be ready to rock and roll, and they need to be strong, and they need to be trained. So your tier two should be on the verge of tier three all the time, and tier three should be on the verge of tier two all the time, and
Mm-hmm.
that's bench strength to me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you're not always going to have a staff of all stars, and if it happens, I haven't seen it. Uh,
Yep.
but that doesn't take anything away from tier three, tier two. I mean, this is a hard conversation, because it's not
Sure.
like we're demeaning anybody and what they do. We know how hard they work. Some
Mm-hmm.
people, A, might be they've been doing it longer. B, they're natural. I mean, there's some chefs that are in their early 20s that don't need 10 years of experience. They just
Mm-hmm.
get it. So it's not demeaning people. Everybody is as important as a human. But when it comes to their productivity at work, that's where people get tiered. I get tiered. I'm sure I'm tiered at my job. So
I'm tearing
I
up right
think
now.
they're tearing up right now.
Oh no,
I, I
sorry.
I just think it's important to keep them on that plan to move forward, because if
Mm-hmm.
you don't want to say, oh, you're always going to be, if I heard that, I'll drive me nuts. And I said, oh, you're always going to be a tier three.
There
No.
has
We
to be
want,
opportunity to move. What's the point? It's like the
yes.
annual goals where we're giving everybody 5 stars, but I don't give out 5 stars because that's impossible. Then why is it on the list? Why is it there?
Yeah.
It has to be attainable. And if you can't explain to your team what it takes to get that 5 stars or that highest merit for an annual goal, and similarly, if you can't explain to your team what it takes for this individual to receive tier one status, to become that ace, to become that high important staff member that you want on your busiest shifts, if you can't explain that to them, If you can't help them get there, then I'd strongly suggest getting out of management. Get out of the way, and let's find somebody who can explain that to them. Or, I mean, let's consult, like hire me. Let's talk through what it means to get there, because you have to be able to explain that to them. It can't be unattainable. You've got to be able to get there, and your team has to know what they need to do in order to get there.
Yeah, communication, expectations. I mean,
So,
that is it.
So how does staffing affect training?
How does staffing affect training?
Mm-hmm.
It's everything. I mean, I think it is your staff. I mean, I know management trains the new staff, really, but how much do they really train them on the day-to-day operational stuff?
It'd be impossible to train everything. Yeah, you've got to learn something on the job. Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to be very blunt. My tier ones or the aces sometimes are terrible trainers.
Oh, it's a different skill set. Oh, your job and training are different skill sets completely. And I'll argue I could have a tier 3 performer who is a tier 1 trainer because they know how to explain the thing that they can't do very well.
Yeah, well, it's the same thing. It's like, people always ask, why isn't like Peyton Manning coaching? Can he coach? I mean, because he can't coach his expectations, so some of my best trainers weren't tier 1s, and then that's a miss. Some managers say, oh, well, he's the best, or she's the best, so let's make her a trainer. I'm like, well, no, that might not be good. It just might not. It's a different skill set. Am I answering that question correctly for your training and staffing?
Yeah. One of my favorite trainers of all time was a bartender that other bartenders didn't like working with. She was good, but on a Friday night, they all said she talks too much. She keeps talking. I just need her to put her head down and work. But she was a great trainer because she talked too much. And for a brand new person in that building, somebody who's talking through everything that they do, who's setting up, oh, this is happening, this many customers just walked in the front door, we're out of this, we're moving this, that seasoned bartenders, like, we know that because we looked around. But a brand new bartender loves that because they're like, oh, I didn't think about that. Oh, I didn't think about that. Yeah. And that's just, to feed your point, is an example of somebody who was a phenomenal trainer, but not somebody that you put on a Friday night just because they rubbed people the wrong way because of their natural tendency to explain what was happening.
Yeah, like an overthinker. Like, they're pegged as being slow, but they're not slow. They're just patient and they're very methodical. Yeah. And that's who I want training, because that's what the trainee needs. Mm-hmm. I am not that. I am not.
I'll be that. Yeah, I'm not your Friday night bartender.
I am not a patient person in general. So I put that on somebody else. That's I can methodically and give them the deep dive into things, but when it comes to when game time, I'm the one that just goes, and so I'm not the best trainer for live training. When it comes to behind the scenes training, that's where you want me.
Sure. Yeah. So similar question, how does staffing affect safety throughout the restaurant?
How does staffing affect safety?
For example, let's say that you're understaffed on a Friday night. Is safety going to be an issue?
That's a good question. I've never thought about that. Ever my entire life, never thought understaffing would be a safety issue. But
so let's think about this. You're understaffed. You're overwhelmed because of the volume coming
running around.
Are you more likely to overlook some common safety issues?
Yeah, I mean, let's say you're too busy to check an ID. Too
busy to wash your hands.
Too busy running in the kitchen, you slip and fall.
Sure.
I think that's a very good insight. I would never. That's never popped in my mind. Except for maybe having a bouncer on staff.
Sure. So I think staffing levels, you got to consider it, not just for the labor model, but for the safety aspect as well.
Yeah.
Because if you're understaffed, somebody's cutting corners.
Yeah. Experiencing right now with this coming out of COVID, when it comes to hand washing, and you cannot cut those corners, and the table turn time is going to be longer. So your checkout is going to be more, and you got to be more patient.
We talked about this on our returning from COVID conversation. That table turn time is going to increase, but the expectations of cleaning the table, we said it then, and I mean it now, are no different than they were before. We were always supposed to wash that table. We were always
Yeah.
supposed to sanitize everything. We were always supposed to clean it. Just now, more people are going to be paying attention to it. So the cleaning standards are arguably the same as they were before, but now the cleaning expectations are finally up to where they should have been before. And for all you safety people out there, this might be an unfortunate event that got us to where those standards are finally becoming a thing. And for the general population out there, I hope that this is an eye-opener for where we've had some of those standards in place and we didn't always do it, because we're so in a rush to sit down. We're so in a rush to get service now that we're allowing a restaurant to not completely clean the table or the bathrooms or whatever it might be. And I really hope that that's one of the good things that come from this, is that we're paying attention to those things more.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. We talked about that in depth, and it takes an unfortunate event to kind of shove it down people's throats, saying this is important, period.
And to go back to this topic, which is staffing and your labor model, is prepare to have enough people on staff to be able to take care of those things. Prepare to allow them not to get flustered or overwhelmed, so that they can push forward and that they can take care of safety sanitation the way that it needs to be. Final question for you. What is the one thing you'd encourage managers, owners to consider in order to improve staffing labels? What's the one thing you'd encourage managers or owners to consider in order to improve their staffing levels and follow a labor model?
One thing? Can I just have one? Can I have three?
You always have three. I should have known. Yeah. What are the three things you think
Yeah, exactly.
should follow?
Remember, I have 3 pillars. I got 3 pillars, Les. Just let me have my 3 pillars,
like
and you can
at night, like in your bed, like pillars.
not pillows, pillars, like Roman pillars, the one with the I'm going to give you 3. I mean, I can't give you one. I think, well, if one, I'd say plan is probably the number one thing.
Planning.
I plan, technology, and communication. You can
Cool.
put it wherever way you want to, and you could say that the plan has all that in there. But really, planning for the future of what's, you have to predict. I mean, it might not be right, and that's okay. But like you said, overstaffing. You expect to be busier. That's the whole point of being a restaurant. We want to make more money, and so I say have a plan. Use technology and make sure you communicate. I mean, the biggest miss, a lot of this, you could have all the technology in the world, but if you don't know how to communicate it and how to train it, it's just a block. So I think communication is key to almost any success at any restaurant. It comes to your staff, it comes to staffing levels, it comes to your customer service, online presence, whatever. Communication is key.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Great, great talking point. Great place to end. Plan, communicate, make sure everybody knows what's going on. I think you and I both agree that when you can't hit the staffing levels perfectly, overstaff for all the reasons that you can, so that you can improve morale, that you can improve the competitiveness of your team so that they can move up to a tier 1, help with the safety and sanitation within your building, and really do everything that all these conversations are aimed for, which is to improve your business and improve sales and to better your restaurant or any business that you're in. Please be sure to follow our channel, show some love, send us some comments, tell us about what you do or what you think with staffing levels and with your labor model, and send us your strategies and insights, and we'll follow back and let you know where we would go with your situation or any questions or suggestions that you have as well. Thank you so much. Paul, anything to add before we get out of here?
Nope, I'm all good.
Cool. Thanks, everybody.
Have a good day.